Hello dear students, welcome to our YouTube channel Smart PTE Tricks. Today I am here in front of you with the good news that now we are starting our PTE online classes. If you are interested, then contact us on the numbers given below. And thanks for your love and support. Keep supporting.
Capital has often been thought of narrowly as physical capital, the machines, tools, and equipment used in the production of other goods, but our wealth and well-being also relies on natural capital. If we forget this, we risk degrading the services that natural ecosystems provide, which support our economies and sustain our lives. These services include purifying our water, regulating our climate, reducing our flood risk, and pollinating our crops. One reason why our natural resources continue to be degraded is that decision-makers do not have a reliable way to assess the true value of the services that ecosystems provide. A big rise in state schools rated among the best institutions in the country is revealed in the latest edition of the Good Schools Guide. Middle-class parents facing financial pressures in the downturn are increasingly looking beyond the private sector to educate their children. The 23-year-old Good Schools Guide, a popular reference book for fee-paying families set on the best private schools, has increased the number of state schools in this year's edition to 251. Pushing the figure to more than a quarter of its 1,000 entries for the first time. Most people assume, correctly, that flowers look the way they do to attract insects that pollinate them. But that's not the whole story. Scientists have now discovered that plants have another trick up their leaves to make themselves irresistible to even the most choosy insect solar power. Cambridge University's Beverly Glover and her colleagues recently set up some fake flowers filled with a sugar solution, which they kept at different temperatures. Unleashing a team of bumblebees on their floral offerings, they watched as the insects visited the flowers to drink the surrogate nectar. Very quickly, it became obvious that the bees were concentrating on the flowers with the warmest nectar. Researchers enlisted 95 volunteers. Their sleep patterns were measured to make sure that lack of rest didn't distort the results. Those who got drunk on bourbon reported worse hangovers, headaches, nausea, and general discomfort. And they performed worse on tasks that required careful attention for decision-making. They didn't sleep any worse than vodka drinkers, though. Here's why bourbon might hurt more. Many alcoholic beverages contain byproducts of fermentation called congeners, complex organic compounds that in large doses can have toxic effects. And darker distilled drinks and wines generally have more of these congeners than do lighter ones. If you haven't already picked up on the trend from all the whining on Bravo's princesses, Long Island, marriage rates in America are at an all-time low. And the median age at which women do say, "I do," is now 27, the highest it's been in a century. That's according to a new report by Bowling Green State University's Julissa Cruz, published by the National Center for Family and Marriage Research. In the 1920s, 92 women walked down the aisle each year per 1,000 single women of marrying age. Today, it's a third that. Marriage rates were expected to plateau in the wake of the baby boom, but so far they just keep dropping. Apparently, Many college-educated women are simply putting off getting hitched, and many black women might be foregoing it altogether. This is a challenging time for UK students, and we should be making their transition from university to the globalized world easier, not harder. The British Academy has voiced its concern over the growing language deficit for some years, and the gloomy statistics speak for themselves. We need decisive action if we are remedying this worsening situation. The roots of the problem lie within schools, but vice-chancellors have the power to drive change and help their students recognize the importance of learning language, and about the countries where they are spoken and the cultures they sustain. We urge them to act and protect this country's long-term economic, social and cultural standing. As demand for food and competition for land rises, it is vital that crop losses are limited. Chemical protection has provided effective control of crop losses in recent years. Alongside chemical fertilizers and improved crop genetics, it has helped to increase crop yields dramatically over the last 6 decades. However, there is now a need to develop complementary alternatives, and researchers from the Rural Economy and Land Use Program have been exploring the potential of, and barriers to, alternative pest management approaches. Alternatives to chemical pesticides are needed because overuse of them leads to pesticide resistance and affects biodiversity and water quality, says Dr. Alistair Bailey. The University of Story feature films are narratives. They tell stories. Even films based on true events will fictionalize them in order to produce drama, to telescope time, to avoid being filled up with too many minor characters, or simply to be more entertaining. Even in the current welter of special effect movies, feature films are usually summarized by their plots in their first treatment, or outline of the script idea, in the advance publicity, in the TV guide, in reviews, and in conversations. Films may differ from other kinds of narrative literary fiction or television drama, for instance in the medium used and the representational conventions. Traditionally, mass communications research has conceptualized the process of communication in terms of a circulation circuit or loop. This model has been criticized for its linearity, for its concentration on the level of message exchange, and for the absence of a structured conception of the different moments as a complex structure of relations. But it is also possible, and useful, to think of this process in terms of a structure produced and sustained through the articulation of linked but distinctive moments: production, circulation, distribution, reproduction. This would be to think of the process as a complex structure in dominance, sustained through the articulation of connected practices, each of which, however, retains its distinctiveness and has its own specific modality. Good sense appears to have prevailed at last. With a fresh set of draft rules to replace last year's poorly conceived ones, the center has sought to withdraw the ban on sale of cattle for slaughter in animal markets. The draft rules are now open for comments and suggestions. When the Union Ministry for Environment, Forests and Climate Change notified the rules under the Prevention of the Cruelty to Animals Act on May 23, 2017, there was concern that in the name of preventing cruelty to animals and regulating livestock markets, the government was surreptitiously throttling the cattle trade and furthering the BJP's cow protection agenda. The rules were criticized for restricting legitimate animal trade and interfering with dietary habits. When that happens, staff will help the person strung out now a little stressed fish their drugs out of the rubbish. On their way out, they might have a blood test, their first dental checkup in years, or just a hot cup of Milo. We enable people to inject in the center because that's what they do, the medical director, Nico Clark, tells Guardian Australia during a recent visit to the North Richmond Community Health Centre. The majority are dependent on their substances. The purpose is not to be the place that facilitates injection per, the purpose is to keep people alive. Victorian government rejects criticism of drug injecting rooms, saying it is saving lives. The increased funding will go to nutrition programs including school breakfast and lunch and more. First Lady Michelle Obama issued a supportive statement upon receiving the news of the passage of the bill that could impact the Let's Move campaigns that aims to end childhood obesity within a generation. I congratulate Chairman Miller and the House Education and Labor Committee on the successful bipartisan passage of a child nutrition reauthorization bill out of the committee today. This important legislation will combat hunger and provide millions of schoolchildren with access to healthier meals, a critical step in the battle against childhood obesity. In this age of cheap DNA technology, scientists are sequencing every sample they can get their hands on. They've ID'd the microbes in mosquito guts, coral mucus and frog skin. In polar ice, even floating in the Earth's atmosphere. But it turns out some of the bugs reported to belong to those unusual microbiomes could unfortunately be contaminants, from non-sterile lab reagents and DNA extraction kits. Says a study in the journal BMC Biology. Researchers sequenced a pure sample of just one type of bacteria. But depending on which kit they used, which reagents, which lab, their results contained DNA from up to 270 different bacterial strains. Many of those contaminating strains are commonly found on human skin, a lab technician's, maybe, or in soil or water. Coastal fish farms seem to do less harm to nearby plants and animals than previously believed, a new study reveals. And marine ecosystems can recover from this damage surprisingly fast. But the analysis of a single trout farm internationally renowned in a Faroe Islands fjord over nearly a year also shows that these facilities need to be placed carefully, and that there's a limit to how many can operate in a particular area before its biodiversity suffers lasting harm. In coastal farms, fish live in large cages hanging from pontoons on the surface. Fish feces and uneaten food sink to the seabed, affecting its ecosystem. Badly managed farms can also have serious effects on the surrounding water column.
In terms of population characteristics, Australia and New Zealand have much in common. Both countries have minority indigenous populations, and during the latter half of the 20th century have seen a steady stream of migrants from a variety of regions throughout the world. Both countries have experienced similar declines in fertility since the high levels recorded during the baby boom, and alongside this have enjoyed the benefits of continually improving life expectancy. One consequence of these trends is that both countries are faced with an aging population, and the associated challenge of providing appropriate care and support for this growing group within the community.